Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
The ground shook violently. Loud booms filled the air as heavy cannon fire rained down. It was the fierce battlefield of Waterloo. Soldiers fought with courage, but also with great fear. The fate of all Europe was not clear, hanging by a thin thread. This was a time when leaders made choices that changed history forever. The air was thick with smoke, and the sounds of war were everywhere. How did a young man, born poor and from a small, forgotten island, rise to lead the most powerful army the world had ever seen? This book will tell the amazing journey of Napoleon Bonaparte. His story is full of surprises. He started his life far from power and fame. He was born on Corsica, a beautiful but tiny island in the Mediterranean Sea. It was not a place where great leaders usually came from. He was seen as an outsider by many. From a young age, Napoleon faced many difficulties. In school, he was often bullied because of his strong accent and his small size. Other students made fun of him. But he was very smart and studied hard. He spent hours with books and maps, learning about war and how to move armies. He dreamed of proving everyone wrong. This difficult childhood helped shape his strong will and his burning desire to succeed. We will follow Napoleon's incredible path from these humble beginnings. He became a legendary figure, a brilliant military leader, and a conqueror who changed the map of Europe. He built an empire that stretched across many lands. His strategies are still studied today by soldiers and leaders around the world. His name became known everywhere. His first big chance came during the exciting and dangerous time of the French Revolution. This was when France changed from a kingdom to a republic. There was much fighting and disagreement. The country was in chaos. In this time of great change, a young Napoleon, still quite new to the army, found his first real opportunity to show what he could do. As the smoke from his first battles cleared, a very risky decision lay before him. This choice had the power to end his life before his legendary story had even truly begun. Or it could be the first step towards his grand destiny. A young soldier. Napoleon was born on the island of Corsica in 1769. His family was of Italian origin, but Corsica had only become part of France 1 year before his birth. At first, his father supported Corsican freedom from French rule, but he later became friends with the French governor. This connection helped Napoleon get a special chance to study in France. When he was 9 years old, Napoleon left Corsica from mainland France. He first attended a religious school in Autun to learn French, as his native languages were Corsican and Italian. Even after many years, he spoke French with a strong Corsican accent, and often struggled with French spelling, which made him stand out. In May of that year, he transferred to a military academy called Brienne-le-Château. Life there was hard. Other students often mocked him because of his accent, his Corsican background, and his relatively small size. Feeling like an outsider and always having to defend himself, Napoleon became very reserved and spent much time alone, finding comfort and purpose in books and study. He dedicated himself to learning, especially mathematics, in which he excelled. He also deeply studied history and geography, which would later be vital for his military plans. Napoleon was particularly drawn to artillery, the big, powerful cannons used in warfare. He understood how these weapons could change a battle. His teachers noted his skill and focus. In 1784, he was accepted into the prestigious École Militaire in Paris to train as an artillery officer. His father's death the following year meant less family income, forcing Napoleon to complete the usual 2-year course in just 1 year. He worked extremely hard to finish. He graduated in 1785, making history as the first Corsican to finish this elite military school. He then became a second lieutenant in the French Royal Army. The difficulties of his youth, constantly feeling like an outsider and having to prove himself, created a deep, burning ambition within him. This powerful desire pushed him to achieve more than anyone expected, fueled by a need to overcome past slights. Napoleon spent periods on leave in Corsica, where he actively supported the French Revolution, which had begun in 1789. He promoted its cause on the island, seeing it as a chance for change. This time was full of chaos and major shifts across France. Soon, the revolution's fires would truly erupt, tearing the country apart and pulling the young, untested soldier directly into the line of fire. 3. Rising to power. After the French Revolution began, Napoleon's military skills quickly became clear. His first major chance to show his talent came at the Siege of Toulon in 1793. Toulon was an important port city held by British and Spanish forces who were against the French government. Napoleon, as an artillery commander, made a smart plan. He knew that if the French could capture a high point overlooking the harbor, they could fire cannons down onto the enemy ships. His plan worked well. The successful attack on this position led to the capture of the city in December. This victory brought him to the attention of powerful leaders, like Augustin Robespierre, and earned him a quick promotion to brigadier general. 2 years later, in 1795, Paris faced a rebellion. People who supported the old king rose up against the new government. The government needed someone strong to stop them. They chose Napoleon. He quickly placed cannons around the city, especially near the Tuileries Palace. On October 5th, he used his artillery to fire on the rebels with great force. Between 300 and 1,400 rebels died, and the uprising was quickly stopped. This ruthless action made him a hero to the government, the French Directory. He was then promoted to commander of the Army of the Interior, and in January of the next year, he was appointed head of the Army of Italy. In 1796, Napoleon led his first major campaign in Italy. His army faced a larger Austrian army and their Italian allies. Napoleon used new, fast tactics, moving his troops quickly and attacking when his enemies did not expect it. He won many impressive victories, like at Castiglione and Rivoli, outsmarting his opponents again and again. His army captured 150,000 prisoners and many cannons. He pushed the Austrians back, forcing them to sign for peace. He also took a lot of money and valuable art from the areas he conquered. This success made him very famous in France and across Europe. He even started his own newspapers to share news of his victories and ideas, building his public image. Next, Napoleon planned a bold, exotic expedition to Egypt in 1798. He wanted to cut off Britain's trade routes to India and weaken their power.
His army sailed to Egypt, bringing many scientists and scholars with them. They won battles against the local Mamluk forces, including the Battle of the Pyramids. However, disaster struck at sea. On August 1st, the British fleet, led by Admiral Horatio Nelson, found and destroyed most of Napoleon's ships in the Battle of the Nile. Napoleon and his army were now trapped in Egypt, far from France. His hope for conquering the Middle East was fading, and he faced a terrible choice: stay with his stranded army, which was suffering from disease and uprisings, or return home alone. 4. The new ruler. Napoleon came back to France from Egypt. The government, called the Directory, was weak and unpopular. People wanted strong leadership. In November 1799, Napoleon made a bold move. With help from others, he successfully took power in a coup. This event is known as the Coup of 18 Brumaire. He then became the first Consul of France, holding most of the country's power. As first consul, Napoleon started many important changes. He worked to bring order and strength back to France. He created a new central government system. He also improved state finances and established the Bank of France. A very important achievement was the Napoleonic Code, introduced in March 1804. This code created clearly written laws, ensuring equality for all men and protecting property rights. It also allowed people to practice different religions freely.
However, it reduced some rights for women and children. Napoleon's power grew stronger. In May 1802, the French people voted for him to be consul for life, showing his popularity. He also sold the large Louisiana territory to the United States in 1803, which brought funds to France. The final step in his rise happened in December 1804. In a lavish ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of the French. Pope Pius VII was present, but Napoleon took the crown and placed it on his own head. He did this to show his power. He then crowned his wife, Josephine, as Empress. He was now Emperor Napoleon I. He further became King of Italy in 1805. He had built a powerful new empire. But not everyone was happy. Other kings and leaders in Europe watched Napoleon with suspicion. They saw his growing power and ambition as a direct threat to their own countries. Secretly, these neighboring kings began to plot and make plans in the shadows. They wanted to find a way to stop Napoleon and crush his new empire before it became too strong to challenge. Winning big battles. Napoleon now built a powerful force called the Grande Armée. This army had about 350,000 well-trained soldiers ready for battle. Many other countries then formed a coalition against France in 1805. At the Battle of Ulm, Napoleon showed his cleverness.
His army moved quickly and outflanked the Austrian forces. He captured 60,000 Austrian soldiers with very few French losses. This big win was a good start, but Britain's navy defeated France at the Battle of Trafalgar, showing a weakness at sea. The greatest land victory came at the Battle of Austerlitz on December 2, 1805. Napoleon used a tricky plan. He made his right side look weak, almost like it would feign retreat. This made his enemies, Russia and Austria, think they could win easily. As they moved down from the Pratzen Heights to attack, Napoleon's hidden troops struck back hard. Many Russian soldiers tried to escape across a frozen lake, but the ice broke and thousands drowned in the cold water. It was a terrible trap. After this, Austria had to pay a large indemnity and lost land. Napoleon changed the map of Europe. He made his brother Joseph king of Naples and his brother Louis king of Holland. He also created the Confederation of the Rhine, a group of German states, which ended the old Holy Roman Empire. In 1806, Napoleon easily beat Prussia at the Battle of Jena-Auerstedt. The next year, he also defeated the Russians at Friedland, forcing them to make peace. Napoleon now ruled much of Europe, and his power seemed total, but his wish for complete control pushed him to look for new challenges, eyeing a massive, unconquerable enemy to expand his empire even further.
The mistake in Russia. Napoleon's ambition now stretched far to the east, aiming at a massive new enemy, Russia. In the summer of 1812, he gathered the largest army Europe had ever seen, a multinational force of around 450,000 soldiers. He had already annexed parts of Europe and formed alliances, but Tsar Alexander of Russia did not like Napoleon's growing power. Russia stopped French imports and seemed to seek an alliance with Britain. Napoleon suspected Russia wanted to rebuild Poland, while Russia worried about Napoleon's plans there. On June 24, Napoleon's Grande Armée marched into Russia. Napoleon hoped to quickly force the Russians into big battles, but the Russians had a different plan. They retreated deeper, burning crops and houses as they went. This scorched earth tactic meant Napoleon's army found little food for themselves or their horses. The long march grew harder each day. By August, after losing many men to sickness and hunger, Napoleon captured Smolensk, but the Russian army still escaped. On September 7, the two huge armies finally met at the Battle of Borodino, near Moscow. It was one of the bloodiest days of fighting Europe had ever seen. Both sides suffered terrible losses, with tens of thousands of soldiers dead or wounded. Napoleon won the field, but the Russian army was not destroyed. 1 week later, Napoleon entered Moscow, expecting to find the Russian capital ready for surrender.
Instead, a terrifying, unexpected nightmare awaited his army. Moscow was empty and quiet. The next night, fires started. The city began to burn on the orders of the Russian governor. Napoleon watched as his prize turned to ashes. Tsar Alexander refused to discuss peace. After 6 frustrating weeks, with winter coming, Napoleon had to order his army to leave Moscow. The retreat was a catastrophic nightmare. The freezing Russian winter arrived early. Soldiers faced intense cold, heavy snow, hunger, and attacks from Russian forces and angry peasants. Thousands died daily. The once powerful Grande Armée began disintegrating as men froze or starved to death. By December, as the army was almost completely destroyed, Napoleon left his invincible forces and rushed back to Paris. Trapped in the freezing snow, starving, and surrounded by angry Russian forces, his once great army faced total destruction. 7. Losing the crown. The terrible winter in Russia meant a catastrophic retreat for Napoleon's Grande Armée. Soldiers suffered greatly from extreme cold, hunger, and attacks from Russian forces. Many died from disease and freezing conditions. By the time the army reached safety, it was only a small part of its former self.
Napoleon left his disintegrating army and quickly returned to Paris. Europe's kings saw Napoleon's weakness. Prussia and Austria joined Russia and Sweden, forming a new, strong alliance against France. They gathered huge armies.
In 1813, Napoleon faced these combined forces at the Battle of Leipzig. This was one of the biggest battles of the wars. Napoleon's army fought bravely, but they were defeated. French losses were very high. After this devastating loss, the Allied armies pushed into France. Paris itself was captured. Napoleon had lost almost everything. His own generals and advisors told him he had no choice. In April 1814, Napoleon was forced to agree to an abdication. He gave up his title as Emperor of the French. The European powers then sent Napoleon into exile. He was sent to a small island called Elba in the Mediterranean Sea. He was made ruler of Elba, but it was a very small kingdom, just 10 kilometers from the coast of Tuscany. He tried to make improvements on the island, but he lacked money and real power. While in Elba, he heard that the new French king, Louis XVIII, was not popular. He also heard rumors that he would be moved to an even more remote island. Napoleon made a bold plan. In February 1815, he secretly left Elba with about 1,000 loyal soldiers on a ship called the Inconstant. He landed on the French coast and began to march towards Paris. Soldiers sent to stop him instead cheered for him and joined his side. Marshal Ney, a famous general who had promised to capture Napoleon, also joined him. Without firing a single shot, Napoleon entered Paris.
King Louis XVIII fled. Napoleon was back on the throne, but the peace in Europe was broken. The other European powers were shocked. Great Britain, Russia, Austria, and Prussia formed an unprecedented new alliance known as the Seventh Coalition. They prepared their armies to march against him once more for one final epic showdown. 8. The Final Days. The story reached its final dramatic point at the Battle of Waterloo in June 1815. Here, Napoleon faced a large alliance of European armies. His soldiers fought bravely, but the combined forces of Wellington and Blücher were too strong. This was Napoleon's ultimate defeat, ending his 100 days of renewed power. He lost the battle, and with it, his dream of ruling Europe. After this loss, Napoleon had to give up his power for a second time. He surrendered to the British and was sent into exile to the very remote island of St. Helena. This small, isolated island was far away in the Atlantic Ocean. Over 2,000 soldiers guarded it, and 10 ships constantly patrolled the surrounding waters to prevent any escape. Napoleon lived in Longwood House, a damp, windswept building with rats. He often complained about these harsh conditions to the governor, but his concerns were dismissed. He tried to maintain an imperial air, insisting on formal dinners. He spent his days reading, dictating his memoirs, and sharing thoughts on past campaigns.
He hoped public opinion might force his release, but this never happened. His health began to fail in mid-1817. His doctor diagnosed chronic hepatitis and warned that Napoleon's poor health worsened due to the climate and lack of exercise. However, the governor thought the doctor was exaggerating the problem. In November 1818, the Allies decided Napoleon would remain a prisoner on St. Helena for life. This news made him more depressed. On May 5, 1821, at the age of 51, Napoleon Bonaparte died. Doctors reported he died from stomach cancer, the same illness that had killed his father. A theory of arsenic poisoning also arose from high levels found in his hair, but such levels were common in 19th century medicines. A recent study in 2021 concluded that stomach cancer was the cause. He was buried on St. Helena, but his remains were later moved to France and entombed in Les Invalides in Paris. Napoleon's legacy remains strong and complex. His legal system, the Napoleonic Code, brought clear and equal laws to France, influencing legal systems globally. He also introduced public education and ended feudalism. Yet his rule was authoritarian. He started wars that devastated Europe, censored the press, and reduced women's rights. What do you think was the most important thing Napoleon left behind for the world?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.